welcome to this look at what has been quite the momentous Hong Kong racing season, which wraps up at Sha Tin on Sunday. It's been 88 meetings stretching back to September last year, and plenty has been fit into that 10 months or so since we got action underway for the 2022-23 season. As I welcome in Graham Cunningham. Graham, it's been something of a record-breaking season, but also a season in which Hong Kong has really put itself back onto the world stage.
I think so, in more ways than one. And I think it's a case of three reigning champs doing their thing and one new champ. And the new champ, I think, is the first category we're going to kick off with. That's the sprinters, Andrew.
That's right. And it's been something of a changing of the guard this year. We've seen Wellington still manage to retain his title in the Hong Kong sprint as that champion sprinter, but Lucky Sweynesse very much coming onto the scene later in the season.
No question about it. What a horse he's been. He's gone from strength to strength. He's been aggressively campaigned and he's thrived on that aggressive campaign. Let's pick up a couple of videos, Andrew. I think race 620, the Chairman's Sprint Prize, this was the race that confirmed there was a new king in town in the sprint division. When we look at this, it's really smooth. He's beaten Wellington fair and square, Courier Wonder, and this was followed up by another equally silky performance. Now, the Group 3 Sha Tin Vase, race 718, you could say it's only a Group 3, but as you know, Andrew, it's under handicap conditions. And this horse, Lucky Sweynesse, when we pick him up here, is giving £20 to a real up-and-coming sprinter called Victor the Winner. And he turns him away, and he turns him away in ruthless fashion. He hasn't turned 5 yet, so there's every reason the best could be yet to come. He's revived Manfred Mann's career. In more ways than one. I think he's got him the extension to his training career, and he's given him a superstar in the autumn of his training career. He seems to be regarded by many people as the world's best sprinter. Very difficult to compare sprinters from different countries all over the world, but he's deadly at the moment, and it's impossible not to be impressed by him. And I'm not sure if there's a youngster coming through who can get within £10 of him in the next few months.
And that's the thing, we'll probably see him under handicap conditions. His only blot was in the Hong Kong sprint, though, and that was at the hands of Wellington. Yeah,
and Wellington was a deserving winner on the day, but Zac Purton and Lucky Sweynesse saw zero daylight that day. It took them time to put it right, but they did put it right. He is a very worthy champion sprinter, and we'll come back to this a bit later. Some would say, including Zac Purton, a very worthy Horse of the Year contender.
Yes, we will come back to that in a moment. Hong Kong International Day, we did see another horse turned over surprisingly in Golden 60, but that was his the only thing that really stopped him from building this incredible season in which he's managed to go from strength to strength unbelievably at this point of his career.
Yeah, 7 years of age, and maybe not quite as brilliant as he used to be. I think there's been a subtle but important change in his game style, in his running style now. I don't think he can rattle off those 21.3 closers like he used to, but he's become a bit more relaxed. That means Vincent Ho can ride him closer to the pace, and he's had a tremendous season. As you said, he couldn't turn over California Spangle in December, but let's pick up not one, not two, but 3 races from him. 375, the Stewards Cup. This was billed as one of the most eagerly anticipated races in Hong Kong for many, many years, decades, in fact. 3 aces, the Spangle, Romantic Warrior, and Golden 60. He didn't go off favourite for the very first time in a long while, Golden 60. But his turn of foot settles it in a great finish against 2 high-quality rivals. Race 451, we move on to the Hong Kong Gold Cup. He moves up to 1.25 miles. Romantic Warrior goes off favourite, but he settles closer to the pace than he often does. And that turn of foot late on is just enough to get the better of an excellent horse in Romantic Warrior. Last but not least, 1.4, he's back to being favourite again. Race 622, the Champions Mile. It's his 3rd win in that race, and it is silky, silky smooth. So this has been one of the great horses in the world for 3 to 4 years now. Questions going forward, he will be 8 when he comes back. He can't fire off those 21-second closers anymore. He has to do it in a different style. But doubting him has been a costly business for a long while now. The stat that always comes to mind with this horse, Andrew, in his, I think, 29 race career, he's put his head in front 25 times and he's 25 from 25 when he leads in a race. He is one of the best finishers in world racing, and he has been for 3 or 4 years now.
It's always looked, or it has looked at times this season, that he might be vulnerable at the hands of Romantic Warrior, who has dominated the middle distance ranks. But really, it's been Golden 60 proving his superiority over Romantic Warrior, who has had, even by anyone's standards, he's had a season that has resulted in a couple of very impressive victories.
They probably will meet again down the track, but it's not guaranteed. I would not be shocked if Golden 60 is treated very gently with another Hong Kong mile in mind, and I would not be surprised if retirement came on the table if he were to win that race. California Spangle looms large as a young horse who could still get better. Beauty Eternal, we'll come to a bit later on, is an up-and-comer, but there's not massive depth to that mile division. So the idea of Golden 60 winning yet another Hong Kong mile, certainly no pipe dream, even at the age of 8.
And Romantic Warrior is seen as the up-and-comer. He's managed to produce 2 very, very special wins this season, 2 wins that in most seasons would be considered the standout performances of the season.
Yeah, he's a very good horse at a mile. He's a very good horse at a mile and a half, and we'll touch on that later. But the sweet spot for Romantic Warrior looks to be a well-run 2,000 metres, and we can pick him up in 2 races, his 2 biggest days in the latest season. Race 240, the Hong Kong Cup, the highlight of HKIR in December. This was a genuinely world-class international field. Runners from Ireland, good horses from Japan, Panthalassa, Jacques d'Or, etc. Dan on the Kid. And look at the way James McDonald bounced clear on Romantic Warrior. He's up in the irons as they pass the post, and that put him firmly among the world's 2,000-metre elite. Then we roll on, race 623, his second QE2 Cup. Prognosis was in town from Japan. Dubai Honor was fresh from 2 big Group 1 wins in Australia. It's not quite as dynamic, but it's emphatic, and he bounced clear to prove that he's among the best 2,000-metre horses in the world. Now, Andrew, I'll put this to you. Only one horse has ever won 2 Hong Kong Cups. He could do that in the next season. No horse has ever won 3 QE2 Cups. He could do that in the coming season. But there's one target nearer to hand in Australia that could take Romantic Warrior to an altogether new level.
That's right. The Cox Plate, which is Australia's weight for age championship. Look, it's a race that I think is very attainable for Romantic Warrior. There really isn't the depth there in the middle distance cohort down here, which I think we saw when Dubai Honor came down and was able to win twice. The first of those wins not so impressive. Was impressive, but not against the caliber of field he met the second time out when he managed to beat Animo easily. I think Romantic Warrior, with that turn of foot, get him around Moonee Valley, and he's going to be mighty hard to beat. But as you say, we've seen before, there's been those targets put out, and they don't make the trip, with Hong Kong targets proving quite the allure. If he does make the trip, though, I wouldn't be wanting to bet against him, that's for sure.
I was chatting to Mick Cannan last week. Mick Cannan bought this horse to go to Hong Kong, and he said Romantic Warrior's owner, Peter Lau, I think his name is mad keen. So that's the key component. Oftentimes it's the owners who are conservative about going abroad, but if the owner wants to go for it, this looks a plan that's likely to come off, which would make it tremendously exciting. And he looks the goods. He looks good enough to go close in a race like this, but he wasn't quite good enough when he went up to 2,400 meters against Hong Kong's strongest stayer, Russian Emperor, Andrew.
That's most definitely the case. We saw him go up in trip for the Champions and Chater Cup, Graham. And look, whatever you want to say about Romantic Warrior that day, it was a training masterclass from Douglas White to bring him back from a Middle East campaign where he managed to win, and then managed to come back and take a second Champions and Chater. Yeah,
he's got a significant CV now, Russian Emperor. Royal Ascot winner. His win in Qatar in February was the first Hong Kong winner abroad since pre-COVID times. That was a significant landmark. But this was a thrilling race, the Champions in Chater. Blake Shin, I think, had ridden him the year before when he won. This time it was Hugh Bonham. It was also Zac Purton for the first time in a race on Romantic Warrior. He went off at 1.2, but he was pestered on the front end by Money Catcher. And Huey Bowman was able to just take his time, bide his time. There was plenty of juice in the ground. It was a proper test of stamina. And Stamina won the day as Romantic Warrior just flagged late on, and Russian Emperor pounced on him. So not too many races in Hong Kong, as you know, really play to the stamina strengths of a horse like Russian Emperor. But there's a race in Melbourne in early November that might play to his strengths. I wonder if that's going to be on the cards. It has been mentioned by Douglas White.
And I know Douglas White is keen to continue travelling him. I know that he saw an improvement in Russian Emperor as soon as he was able to get him across the Middle East after what was a bit of a lethargic start to his season in Hong Kong. And the thing too, his Damn Atlantic Jewel was a multiple Australian Group 1 winner. So I'm sure that the people who bred Russian Emperor, it was the good people at Coolmore, but I'm sure they'll be watching closely to see if he does make that trip down under. We've got those 4 categories, as you mentioned. We're filming this the day before the Hong Kong Champion Awards, where the best horses in Hong Kong and the best horsemen in Hong Kong are recognised. Those 4 categories, the best in each category goes forward and can be named Horse of the Year. So you've got 4 clear category leaders. Just wondering, do you think it's going to be Golden 60 becoming the first horse ever to win 3 straight Hong Kong Horse of the Year titles, or are we going to see Lucky Sweynesse knock him off after, as you said, a season where he's been campaigned aggressively, but he's stood up to all of those tests?
Yeah, never bet too heavily on contests where people's votes are involved, because it brings politics and egos and personalities into play. But Zac Purton, Thursday morning in the South China Morning Post, in a really good piece, makes a very strong case to say that Lucky Sweynesse should be the Horse of the Year. And in his view, it's not even close. And he gives a lot of metrics. He's won 8 races this year, Lucky Sweynesse. He's won more prize money. I think he's won more Group 1s than Golden 60. But Golden 60 has this charisma. He has this aura of the golden boy of Hong Kong racing. And if you asked me to bet, and I wouldn't want to bet too hard, I think the idea of having a 3-time Horse of the Year will appeal to certain members of the voting panel. But either way, the 2 crackerjack horses. Just going back to Douglas White and Russian Emperor again, you talked about the Coolmore operation. I don't deal in rumours, nor do you, Andrew. But a little bird tells me that the same connections who got Russian Emperor from Ballydoyle might be looking at another of their horses, a 3-year-old with some high-quality form, who might well add to Douglas White's strength. But no, Horse of the Year could be Golden 60, could be Lucky Sweynesse. I wouldn't jibe at either of them, but I suspect it'll be the Golden Boy who's Horse of the Year for the record 3rd time running.
And while we're looking at these horses, these great Horse of the Year, it would be remiss of us not to have a look at the Hong Kong Derby, which is the race that is that once-in-a-lifetime glory, as it's marketed by the Hong Kong Jockey Club. It is that chance to unveil the next crop that are coming through to tackle these mile and a half races, mile and a quarter, mile and a half races. We've seen that with the likes of Romantic Warrior, Golden 60 coming off Derby success. This year, though, it was Voyage Bubble getting the victory, and I must say, I've watched this race 100 times, and I still don't know how he managed to win.
Some derbies are great, some derbies are good. This was a good one. It was a super dramatic one because it was run at a snail's pace, and therefore it produced perhaps the ride of the year. I think we say, in terms of being a difference maker, Alexis Bedell spotted that the early fractions were funereal, and he'd made a wild move down the outside from before halfway, from the back towards the front on Voyage Bubble, who was a 45-1 winner in the end, got the better of a 3-way go. And if you're a jockey, how do you like that on your mantelpiece? A picture of you making that wild move and then getting the better of a really tight finish with Ryan Moore on Tuchel and Zac Purton on Beauty Eternal. So hats off to Alexis Bedell for that. Voyage Bubble ran once more after that. He was a good 4th, beaten 3.5 lengths, I think, behind Golden 60 in the Champions Mile. On the figures, that's perhaps his best effort so far. But his rating, Andrew, is 108. Which tells you that he needs to keep improving at a pretty strong rate if he's going to go to war with Golden 60 and company. But he has a derby on his dance card, and a very dramatic 45-1 derby at that.
Those that don't have one who finish so close, Tuchel and also Beauty Eternal, we've seen them go on and win subsequently. But for John Size, their trainer, at least there is going to be a champion trainer trophy on the wall. There's going to be a 12th champion trainer's title. At one point, he would have been looking to finish up at the end of next season. He turned 69 during the week. He turns 70, obviously, at the end of next season, and 70 was the cutoff point. But due to this new rule, which has been dubbed by some the John Size rule, he'll be able to stay around for another 5 years till he's 75.
Yeah, he's been pushing the envelope in more ways than one for a long time, John Size. He's a remarkable man and a sensational trainer. This is his 12th title. He'd been level on 11 for 4 years with George Moore, Hall of Fame Hong Kong trainer George Moore. So to break George Moore's record is tremendous. No knock on the George Moore era, but you have to think this is more competitive than it used to be. I think titles are harder to win these days. And one of his key horses, key contributor to this year's total, is Beauty Eternal. We've already touched on him. Let's have a look at him on his final start. This is race 763, the Group 3 Premier Cup. Hot favourite, as it usually is. Had to work pretty hard, but this was his 7th win in a 10-race campaign. And from, I think, an initial rating of 52 as a PPG, privately purchased Griffin, he's worked his way all the way up to 117 with the promise of better to come. So plenty more big days in him. I read the South China Morning Post piece on John Size's latest title, and I've always found him a very precise, careful guy with words and with everything he does. And this quote was absolutely perfect. In winning his 12th title, he said, "It's meaningful to me, but it's difficult to express in what way." And you get the impression that inside he's bursting with pride, but he's an introvert. He doesn't like to show outward emotion, but 12 titles is a sensational achievement. So well done. Salute to John Size again.
It's a word that's overused, but it is unprecedented territory for John Size and unprecedented territory for Zac Purton as well. Getting to Joe Moreira's mark of 170 last weekend, and now on his way to 180. He stands on 176. He's got 10 rides from the 11 races on Sunday. Can he crack that 180 mark, Graham?
Yeah, the old darts chant, 180. It's possible. But either way, this has been an incredible run from Purton. I always use words like precise and clinical to go with Zac Purton, because I've seen jockeys who were as brilliant. I've been lucky to see lots of world-class jockeys, and Dettori springs to mind. And Joe Moreira himself had that incredible natural skill and brilliance. But only Ryan Moore comes close to Purton when it comes to cold, hard-nosed precision, professionalism. And to come out late last year and say that Joe's 170 was his target, it was a tough call, but he's always been just either on the pace or only just behind it. He was always needing 2 winners a meeting, Andrew, as you know. He upped the pace rapidly late on and passed the total of 170 with a couple of meetings to spare. Let's have a look at a couple of videos. You could pick out 30 or 40 to illustrate Purton's skill. Both of these are recent. 803, race 803, a horse called Sergeant Pepper. He's just a good, honest, work-a-day sprinter. But he was drawn 12 at the Valley last week. The last 99 horses to come from stall 12 on that track had all been beaten. Not Sergeant Pepper. He gunned him from the start, got him in a good position, and just when you thought he ought to flag, Purton lifted him home. An ordinary race, but a very remarkable ride in its way. Then race 811, last Sunday, Magic Supreme, another pretty ordinary horse, but Purton galvanized him and got him home from the front in decisive fashion. But the numbers speak for themselves for this fella, Andrew. You're probably aware of all this, but it bears repeating. 176 winners are pretty much bang on 1 in 4. Try getting a strike rate of 1 in 4 in Hong Kong in a super tightly knit handicap system. He had a 7-timer at Sha Tin in October. He's had 2 5-timers. He's had 8 4-timers. And after another treble at Happy Valley on Wednesday, he's had 19 trebles. They've garnered over 27 million sterling in prize money. That's a major record. It's also more than the top 10 jockeys in Britain combined earned in prize money during last year's championship season. Bear that in mind. All the 10 added together. Dettori, Buick, Moore, Doyle, Murphy, etc. 10 times that lot. And one last major milestone is the one that many people thought would never be threatened, Andrew. You know what I'm going to say. It's 1813. 1,813 winners is the milestone that Douglas White set 7 or 8 years ago now. Most people thought that would never be challenged. I think Zac Purton thought it might never be challenged until recently. And now it's in his head. And if it's in his head, he's going to go for it.
And I think we've seen this season that if he goes for it, he's every chance of making it happen. It's going to be an interesting rest of the year.
I've got a scenario in my mind, Andrew.
Here we go.
I don't think he'll hit 170 next year. I think he'll win the title probably with 150 something, which means that coming up to IR in 2024, Zac Purton would have the 1813 well within reach. He can get it on IR day in 2024 and get the plane back to Australia soon after to retire, because that's the one thing he has in mind now. And I don't think he wants to go on forever. I think he does have retirement in mind, but that target of 1813 is clearly the major target for Purton here on in.
I think it's very much the lure to the bunny there. Is the lure for any greyhound, and he can be greyhound-like in his focus when he's focused on something. You know that he can go for it.
That jockey bunny is going to change. I do believe there are 1 or 2 relatively big names are likely to come in the summer. I have a very high regard for Lyle Hewitson, who's hit 50 for the first time this season. He could easily get into the 70s next year. Vincent Ho will be chasing a first century next year. Luke Ferraris had a treble at Happy Valley. There are young up-and-coming riders there to give Purton a new test. But he is so good, Andrew. As we know, he is so good. He would excel anywhere on the planet.
And the one thing that's interesting, too, is he currently leads the world's best jockey title as well. It'd be interesting to see if he makes a few hit and run missions throughout later in the season throughout later in the year, the Northern Hemisphere season, to be able to get that title as well onto his mantelpiece. Obviously presented IR week, and then as you say, 12 months later, potentially getting to that mark and retiring soon after.
That's a great point. He wants to go global next season, doesn't he? He doesn't want to be completely confined to Hong Kong. That will be his main base and main interest. But if he gets offered rides, Dubai Carnival, down in Australia on the big Saturdays, etc., he could take his show on the road next season.
And it would be quite the farewell tour to maybe not match Frankie Dettori's, but it'll be one that will be worth watching wherever he goes, as he, as you say, gears towards an eventual retirement. But I'm sure he'll have those targets on his in his sights on his way through. But really, has there been another story this season that has matched Zac Purton?
Don't think so. But things are always changing in Hong Kong. Watch this space.
Indeed. Well, look, thank you very much for joining us, Graham. It's been great to chat through this season just gone, and I'm sure there'll be plenty to talk about once the season resumes again in September. There'll be plenty that happens over the next few weeks of the off season, gearing up towards that start in early September.
Thanks, mate. Always a pleasure.
And thank you for joining us. A reminder, make sure you do subscribe. Make sure you are watching in for all of these interviews and videos from right around the world. Thank you for joining us throughout the Hong Kong season, and we look forward to joining you again come September, the start of the 2023-24 Hong Kong season.